Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Ummahpreneur live podcast. And today with me, I have a very special guest that I'm excited to introduce to you. Sister Hafsa Taher is an Instagram marketing coach for Muslim women entrepreneurs. She has helped over 1,000 students leverage Instagram to grow their business. And in today's episode, we're going to reveal some juicy tips and secrets on how you can grow your brand on Instagram as well, thanks to her expertise and her knowledge, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the podcast.
Alaikum salam. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
The honor is definitely all mine. I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today, get to know you a little bit more, share your story with our audience, and even share some of your expertise with them as well, because I know Instagram is definitely a hot topic for entrepreneurs. It's one of the best platforms to grow your business. So it's definitely a great place to be. And I'm sure the knowledge you're going to share with us today is going to be extremely insightful and beneficial. But before we dive into that, I'd love to know a little bit more about you and your story. So can you share with us what inspired you to even become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question, because I started off, I was working for Productive Muslim back in 2009.
Okay.
And it was just an online job. I was working as a VA. I'm like, this sounds fun. And a couple of years into that, I was like, you know what, I want to do something of my own. I didn't know what that meant. I just felt like I'm working on other people's dreams and on other people's passions. And I'm sure most of your listeners can relate to this when you're working for a job, right? It's like you're working, so you absolutely love it. But then at the end of the day, it's somebody else's dream. You're like, what if I could work on my own dream? So I started making greeting cards. And my niece was like 3 years old at that time. And I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, this wasn't like, I want to be the next Muslim Hallmark, right? Just started making greeting cards from YouTube. And then I'm like, oh, this is fun. Just using my niece's 3-year-old's crafting supplies, if you can believe it. Her markers, her pens, and all of that, and and her stickers too. So, and then I started experimenting that, and I was like, oh, this was fun. Made bookmarks, and then a friend of mine was on Etsy. Like, okay, I can sell these on Etsy, and the only reason I was selling is because I wanted my hobby to pay for itself. I wanted to fund my hobby. That was the only reason I started a shop to sell, and that's really how my business started, with $3 greeting cards. And I even like had 20% off on the $3 because it's Black Friday. Everyone has sales. So, and I'm sure most of your listeners can relate to this as you're listening. And I'm sure you might be thinking, oh, that's me too. I'm constantly discounting. That's where I started off as well. So started selling my $3 greeting cards. Alhamdulillah, like really crawling my way up, upped it to like $8 mugs, to $20 mugs, to $100 products, to alhamdulillah having a full-time business for my handmade gifts, and then quit my IT career at that point. And then alhamdulillah, after 7 years of a product-based business, I'm like, what's the next level for me? I want to fill in a gap. And as you're listening, I'm sure you can relate to this, where you feel like you want to do something that where you're needed. You want to do something, and there were so many Islamic gifts at that time, right? I'm like, it feels like we're just causing more noise at one point. Where do I make a difference? What's my genius zone? And this is some question that I want everybody to ask themselves is, where can only I make a difference? So that's when I realized I can use my 7 years of experience in a business and teach other people on how to do what I'm doing. Use Instagram, and Instagram is just one of the platforms, one of the means of growing that business, but alhamdulillah, it was a big one. So I decided to use that expertise and decided to help other businesses on how to grow their $3 greeting cards business as well, right? Help them get to the level that I, alhamdulillah, was able to get to. And that's how I became a coach 3 years ago. Alhamdulillah, over the last two plus years, I started a membership program called Circle of Impact. We are all about Muslim women that are all about making an impact. Tiny steps along the way, right? Consistent action, because the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones that are consistent, and even no matter how small. So being able to actually just keep moving forward. So we started Circle of Impact 2-3 years ago. Alhamdulillah, we have a community, an amazing community of Muslim women helping each other, growing, coaching with me. And yeah, alhamdulillah, that's where we are at today.
Okay, amazing, mashallah. And so I love that. It's like a journey of first starting with just something as simple as trying to fund your hobby that turned into this whole journey of entrepreneurship, and it all snowballed, subhanAllah. And that's really, really cool. And I want to ask you, what is it that motivated you finally to, people that listen to this, they probably feel like at some point, or they are interested in entrepreneurship, they're already entrepreneurs, right? And they probably are questioning themselves, or maybe they're thinking to themselves, when should I dive fully into my business, maybe quit my job, quit my career. For you, what was that point where you made that decision? What were you thinking of, and what was going through your mind when you decided, I'm going to quit my job and really focus full time on trying to succeed in business?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I absolutely think this. Some people think that I'm not made for this. I'm not, this. People like me can do this, and I'll tell you this. Just a bit of a background. I come from a family, like my immediate family. We are not in business. I mean, I was literally told by a lot of people like business doesn't work for people like us, right? So I want the listeners to know you don't have to be from a certain family. You don't have to have certain DNA in your body to actually own a business or be an entrepreneur. Anybody can do this. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge my privileges. Like, alhamdulillah, I had certain privileges set up for me the way, alhamdulillah, the way Allah set up my life, the way Allah's planned my life out. I have privileges that allowed me to take that leap forward. And I do want to put that out there because I don't want to sound like, oh, everybody should be able to do this, right? Yeah. So I do want to add that caveat there that I had privileges that maybe other people don't. But there's some things that I want you to think about when you're debating when you should go into your business full time. Absolutely keep working on your business until it's making an income that you can sustain for yourself. Yeah. Maybe have enough savings, right? So actually, when I quit my full-time job, I always forget to mention that I took a year's sabbatical. I took a 3-month sabbatical first during Ramadan, just needed a break. And then I took a year's sabbatical just to see how things go. So I always had a backup plan. Some people are the kind who have to burn all the boats in order to take that leap. Some people are like that. And obviously you have to assess your financial situation, the responsibilities, because as Muslims, we are all shepherds and we all have responsibilities towards our flock, right? So what are your responsibilities? Who are the people looking up to you? Who do you need to support? All of that obviously needs to take into account. But from an entrepreneur, from a business experience kind of perspective, look at first establish yourself. Do as much as you can along with your business. It's absolutely hard. It's like working 2 jobs. I get that. I've been there myself, and it's exhausting, but there's fun to it, right? But there's the potential that you want to be able to, because at the end of the day, business isn't like you start today, tomorrow you have a 100K launch. That is not going to happen. I mean, it might happen. I mean, anything can happen. Generally, that's not the law of nature, right? It does take time for you to find your niche, find your niche, whatever you want to call it, to find an offer, to work to that offer. Like after 3 years at Circle of Impact, I'm redoing the entire the membership program because I realized, okay, this works. Here's something I want to tweak. So there's constant improvements that go into running a business and having launches and having products and having programs. So it does take time. So work on building your audience, work on getting clear on your message, getting clear on all of that while you're working full time. So whenever you're ready to make that leap, it's like you're making a leap while you're making money, inshallah.
Inshallah, definitely. That's such some great advice that you're sharing here. And I love that you mentioned a very interesting point and something that a lot of entrepreneurs maybe ignore, or, the entrepreneurship world glamorizes, which is, you're going to go and start a business and overnight you're going to become successful and rich and, have all of these things, subhanAllah. But we very well know, you and I, that, it takes months and years to build something and grow it into, a successful operation. And mashallah, you've done this now and you're at a point where you're starting to focus on Instagram coaching. And I want to ask you about that because you went from, as you mentioned, selling products on Etsy to then really going into the coaching space and then finally focusing specifically on Instagram. Now, why is it that you decided to focus specifically on Instagram and help Muslim women entrepreneurs get better and grow on Instagram specifically?
Yeah, funny story. My coach asked me to focus on Instagram. I said, heck no, I'm not boxing myself. So it wasn't easy. I'm a rebel by nature. So I'm like, I refuse to listen to other people. So my coach was like, you know what? You got to find a niche, and the more specific you are, the better it is. I said, heck no, I'm not putting myself in a box. So I tried all the wrong things. I tried being everything to everyone. I'm like, oh yeah, this doesn't work. So part of it kind of came from my lessons learned. But I think one of the things that Instagram is so, like you said, is growing so quickly, but also it's very specific to my zone of genius, because like I was talking about, like you have to find what is one thing you're so good at. Like I am a connection person, I am a people person, I am an introvert to some extent. I don't like big stages. This doesn't feel like a stage, but I don't like big stages. But I do connect with people one on one. So when I'm like on Instagram, I'm connecting with people. All of that is just marketing, right? All of that is just a different form of marketing, and Instagram allows you to connect with people all over the world. In all the social networks out right now, Instagram is so unique in its place because it's kind of like built some momentum. It's a platform that's developed. It's not new like TikTok, or it's not as old as Facebook. Many things only old people are on Facebook, but Instagram's kind of in the middle where you can. It's still growing and it's still actually quite developed for us to use this to engage with people all over the world. Like I have an audience, like my followers from like Indonesia, Malaysia, UK, US, Canada, of course, Australia. That's where I get my members from, right? So being able to reach so many people, and it's such a personal level. And when I say personal, it's not about sharing your bank details or sharing how many kids you have. It's really the one-on-one connections you have sometimes, right? One-on-one connections in your DMs. When you post, you're like talking to that one person and being able to build those relationships. Instagram is kind of like my zone of genius. And that's why it just kind of like was like adding 1+1 and came to experimenting, didn't come overnight though.
Yeah, definitely 100%. It definitely doesn't come overnight, right? It's a process that takes days and months and years. But mashallah, I love that you really focused on the benefits of that platform. And I agree completely, because we use both Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and YouTube, and all these social media platforms for our business. But the one that I really feel like allows us to connect with our audience the most is Instagram, right? Because it is more visual. The people there are more engaged, and to be honest with you, Instagram still allows you to grow an audience without necessarily spending tons of money on ads and boosting posts. Whereas on Facebook, it's a little bit harder now, especially for Facebook pages, you get almost no reach. So it's difficult, right? Instagram still allows you to grow, and it's a great platform for entrepreneurs right now that they can still leverage. Now, I wanted to dive into some Instagram tips, some of your knowledge here that I'm going to squeeze out of you, if that's okay, for our listeners, inshallah.
I'm excited.
Awesome. So the first question that I have for you is, what do you feel is a common or big mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs are making right now on Instagram when it comes to promoting their business?
Yeah, great question. I see this all the time. So one of the biggest, so I have an Instagram framework that I created for my students, and it's been tried and tested over the number of years. And it's called A, B, C, and D. It sounds really simple, and it is really simple. A is for audience, B is for brand, C is for content, D is for drive sales, right? So A is for audience. The reason why I put audience first, everyone says, can I just jump to driving sales? And I'm like, nope, you got to learn A, B, C, and then get to D. And that's one of the number one mistake a lot of business owners make is like, hey, I want to start selling. I'm like, you can do that. Absolutely. Number one, get your foundation right. Who is your audience? And it's like going to an airport and saying, just give me a ticket to any place that sells ice cream. And the customer service person is going to look at you like you're crazy, right? Like that's what we're doing on Instagram, posting and just saying, somebody just buy, right? You don't know what your destination is. You don't know who you want to attract. You don't know who you want to sell to. So number one, getting really clear on your dream customer, dream client. I see getting really clear on what their pains are, what the pleasure, what the points of pleasure are, what is keeping them up at night, what is going on in their life right now is so important, because when you talk to them in the context of what's going on in their life, that's when you're able to reach them. That's when they're able to tag their friends and say, hey, we were talking about this. I know you're struggling with this too. Or they can comment and say, how did you read my mind, right? That's number one. That's the biggest mistake a lot of business owners make, is that they don't get clear. And I know it's not as exciting as getting sales. Like, who wants to sit there and like work on your dream customer? Yeah. It's the foundation. You can't get to the 20th floor. I live on the 22nd floor. You can't get to the 22nd floor without like building your foundation first, right? Without building the foundation of the structure first. So you got to dig that up and like work on that boring stuff first.
Yeah, the audience. So the audience is so key, and it's funny because even at Ummahpreneur we have like our ideal client persona, and we've created her. We've given her a name, and what her fears are, what her interests are, what her desires are. She happens to be a sister, and we have her name as well in house. And subhanAllah, like whenever we create a post or whenever we, want to put out a piece of content, we would say, okay, what would she think about this piece of content? How would she benefit from this? Would she, enjoy this piece of content? And so it's an interesting exercise because it allows you to know when you create something to put yourself in your client's shoes and understand, is this really beneficial for them? Or are you just putting that out there because you like it, right? Because that doesn't always align. So that's really interesting. So A for audience, B was for, what was B for again?
Brand, creating a brand that actually helps you to stand out from competition. Because given we only talk to people like us, we are like, everybody's a coach these days, right? It sounds like the market is saturated, but that's when you have to differentiate yourself. That's where you have to create a brand that helps you stand out from competition, create your unique selling proposition there.
Mm-hmm. For you, what has been, an interesting way or maybe a piece of advice you can give for listeners about, grow specifically the branding aspect that we're talking about right now, how to differentiate themselves or how to really establish their brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times we look for answers outside. We try Google searching, we look at competition, but let me tell you from experience, the answer comes from within. The answer comes from you, and it could be a combination of your different experiences, really just sitting down and asking yourself, what makes me different? Why are people buying from me? And one tip that I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday, and I think this is great for your listeners as well. Go back to your previous customers and ask, what made you buy? Yeah. Right? Because sometimes, and I know I have a lot of peers that are working backwards. They already have people, they might have a couple of people buying from them. And they're like, why are these people buying from me? I don't understand. Why are they paying me? So how do I get more of these kind of people, right? So going back and asking them, what values made you buy? What values do you resonate with? What specifically, where are you in your life right now? Where exactly do you want to get to, right? Asking questions like that will help you see what's standing out you might think, I might think I have an ICF certification. That's why people are signing up for me. And your audience is like, what? SCI, what? Right? They probably have no idea what ICF stands for, right? So in our head, our unique selling proposition might be very different than what our clients are seeing. So asking them is a great way of getting to know what in their perspective, how are you standing out?
That's just such a great tip there, to be honest with you, because a lot of times, as you mentioned, what we think is the reason for generating sales and what is actually generating sales could be two different things. And then you maybe, by mistake, you stop doing what was initially generating sales because you didn't know what that was, right? Exactly. SubhanAllah. So thank you so much for sharing that. So A, audience, B, brand, and what was C again?
Content. Creating content.
C was content. All right. What's a big content mistake that you're seeing Instagram users making right now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest content mistakes is just putting out posts for the sake of putting out posts. It's like sunset and coffee. That's like so 1999. Right. I mean, it's really just 2019 maybe, but it does sound like 1999, right? Because I don't know if Instagram was around in 1999, but a lot of people are like, oh, sunset, I love this sunset photo, but I'm like, what's the point? So in terms of, I know your next question is going to be, how do you create content that converts? Two things your audience needs to keep in mind as you're listening. Two things you need to keep in mind with every single post, or actually three things. One, what is your intention with this? What is your goal with this? And absolutely, as Muslims, every single thing needs to be about pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day, right? Because when you have multiple intentions, it's like spiritual multitasking, you get multiple rewards for it. Every single post, ask yourself, why am I doing this? Number one. Two, what do I want my audience to know? Right? When I do an introduction post, it's not about me just wanting to share stuff about myself. It's about me giving something about my audience for them to relate to me as a coach, right? So asking yourself, what do I want them to know? Even if I'm posting a sunset photo, what do I want them to know? That I take breaks, that I'm human too, and it's okay to take breaks, maybe, right? So, and then the last thing is, what do you want them to do? Call to action with every post. So three things: intention, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do is at the end of the post, is it like tag a friend? Is it like leave a heart? Maybe it's nurturing the existing customers you have, existing followers you have. Or maybe it's click on the link in my bio and apply for the mastermind I have, or click on the link and sign up for the Circle of Impact VIP list, right? So what is that call to action? Or sign up for a freebie, right? So intention, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? And I know a lot of people say, I want to grow my followers on Instagram. My followers are growing. No one's seeing my post. And I want to just say this to everyone that's listening. I made a post in Ramadan that had over 10,000 shares. I never have that kind of post going well. Just
Mashallah.
do something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absolutely. Reposted that same post after 2 months. And that post, I think overall got me over 5,000 followers, right? A lot of people say, oh, Instagram doesn't work. Instagram algorithm hates me and no one sees my post. When you know your dream customer and talk about exactly what they're going through, and I'll share what post that was. So this way you have some context. And when you talk about what they need right now, that's when content gets shared, right? Like talking to people. The post that I'm referring to is the 10 duas for Ramadan, the last 10 nights of Ramadan.
Yeah.
And then I reposted the same thing during the day of Arafah. Which is like 2 months later, right?
Yeah.
And I was repurposing content. It wasn't brand new, but there were people needed that at that time. People were like, okay, we will be fasting tomorrow. We'll be like staying up overnight, or we'll be making dua all day. Here's a list of dua. Let me send this to my friends as well, right?
Okay, I have a question for you about that actually specifically. And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but this is an interesting question because I've had it before myself. Okay, and I've had people come and ask me this question. Okay, because I remember seeing that post with you, Sister Hafsa, and I remember seeing the 10 du'as for the end of Ramadan for Arafah, and I remember seeing that, and we do carousels as well. And I'm like, wow, mashallah, this is so cool, and it's such a great idea. But I always like to be unique and give people like their original credit for their stuff. So I'm like, oh, this is an amazing idea, but we're going to leave it there. We're not going to go and copy that and take it and like try to make our own version, because Sister Hafsa, mashallah, already did it so well. Let's leave that to her. But then I've seen a few other accounts after you did that post kind of go towards the same direction. And so for you, because I think a lot of listeners as well, they can relate to that, where they'll share something on Instagram where they'll have a certain style or a certain approach, and then maybe they'll see other accounts start to kind of copy that a little bit, and they'll feel like annoyed or bothered, or like, oh my God, why is this happening? So I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to this. How do you deal with that when you see that happening? What's your advice for people when they see other profiles maybe copying their content a little bit or copying their style a little bit?
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that. Full disclosure, the first person who actually, not the first person, the post that inspired that was Salam Sadaf, who actually shared her duas. And I said, I was going to Visionary with Sheikh Muhammad Al-Sharif, and I actually looked back at all the duas that had been answered with my product-based business, getting a space, getting to like 50K or whatever the number was.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, let me share my duas so more people can benefit. And I actually credited her in the caption as well.
Mashallah, that's awesome.
I'm like, oh, she's going to get reward from all the people that are benefiting my posts because she's the one who inspired me. Somebody else must have inspired her. That person's inspired, getting reward for everyone that she inspired, that she's inspiring as well, right? So, if somebody else went ahead and created like 10 duas, actually one of my clients did 10 duas for children during the last 10 nights of Ramadan or something like that. I'm like, awesome. I'm so glad you're using this. Yeah. Number one, selfish. I get the reward. Yeah. If I was the inspiration for it, right? Two, she's talking to her own audience. She's not talking to my audience. Three, she has her own spin on it. Very different than mine. Like my duas were actually my duas, right? Like nobody else can copy that. So I think when you get so unique with your own voice, with your own personality, it's hard for people to copy that. And I think one of the things that I try to remind myself is, and this has been proven so many times for me, is that at the end of the day, money, sales comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
100%.
Right? So there's a Christian book that I actually read last year during COVID that talks about there are all these channels that money comes to us, which is customers, maybe products, maybe our website. These are all channels, right? Or maybe it's like a neighbor who's knocking on the door and giving you some basket of fruits, right? These are all channels of risk, channels of sustenance. Where is this channel really connected to? What's the source of all of it, right? Keeping that in mind, subhanAllah, like I just, we launched a mastermind last month, and one of the persons that signed up for the mastermind, it's like a 3K mastermind. I'd never heard of her. I asked, and she messaged me. She said, this other person mentioned you in her caption, and that's how I found you. How could I control that, right? Yeah. Like the way people come to us, the way people buy from us is so out of our hands. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing all of this for us. 100%. When you have that trust, when you know 1,000% it's coming from him, and absolutely you got to tie the camel, but at the end of the day, like when people copy a post, or going back to your question, when people like get inspired by you or use the same idea you had, meh, they get these awards for it, right?
I love that. I love that. MashaAllah. I love the approach that you've taken. And and the reason why I ask is because I had this conversation with one of my students recently. She reached out and she's like, we released this product and this whole, theme and template, whatever. And now I'm seeing like someone else use it. I'm like, in the end of the day, and I shared with her the same thing, which is at the end of the day, there's this, I forgot if it was essentially hadith or if it was actually saying by Imam al-Ghazali. So don't quote me on the source. I apologize for not remembering the source, but essentially what it says, and I think it's more a saying by Imam al-Ghazali, which is, if something is destined for you, it will reach you even if it is beneath two mountains. And if something is not destined for you, it will not reach you even if it is between your two lips, right? Exactly. So subhanAllah. So at the end of the day, whatever is meant for you and destined for you will reach you. Whether someone else copies your post or does something else, or you feel like, oh man, they're stealing my style, that's completely okay, because they can't take away from your rizq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already allocated your rizq, and they cannot do anything to take away from that, right? You will get what it is destined to you. And so just focus on yourself, and at the end of the day, your goal, as you mentioned, you should approach it from a mindset of, ultimately this whole business exists because I'm trying to make a certain difference in this industry. If someone else is helping me make that difference, all the better. Perfect. Now there's more people helping me achieve this mission. Yeah. So that's kind of the angle that you take. And I think taking this angle helps relieve that stress where, someone's always like, you'll also get people reaching out to me, oh, brother, I have this idea, but I don't know if I can really share it with you, or with anyone else, because I'm scared someone will steal it, It's like, okay, dude, number one, I'm working on Ummahpreneur. I have no time for anything else. And number two, I don't think anyone's going to steal your idea, man. It's like, but yeah, there's this fear, right? This fear of like, you're going to take away from me, I think. And what you mentioned is so important to remember.
Yeah. Sometimes when people do share, so I'll give you an example, almost like a mistake that I made. So Ustad Maryam Amil had a post about two sisters who can't fast. It was the last 10 nights of Ramadan. There's this guilt, there's this heaviness. It's like, I'm not able to fast for whatever reason, or even brothers for medical reason or whatever. So for anyone who can't fast, and I just took a caption and made it into a carousel. And the caption said, this is from Ustad Maryam Amil, Jazakallah khair for this post, make sure you follow her and all of that. So in my peer mastermind, one of the sisters said, that post, when I read it, it didn't seem like you were quoting her, even though the quote marks were there, like that, so tiny. I thought you wrote it and it didn't make sense because I know that didn't sound like you. So I said, oh, that's interesting, because my intention was not to mislead, right? Because my intention was to share the goodness she had and reach to more people. So I said, help me do this better. Help me. How can I make it clear that this is hers? So they gave me some advice on make sure every carousel image has her name at the bottom. Make sure before the caption starts, because you only read the first two lines on Instagram. And I know that we're going into a tangent here, but I'm sharing this is because sometimes people have the best of intentions and they just didn't realize what they're doing, right? And sometimes in our head, we're like, oh my God, how dare she copy me? And I don't even think I'd asked my Ustad Maryam for permission before I did that. I'm like, I just want to spread her word. She's awesome. I love her, right? So sometimes there might be people who are doing stuff like that, but they might not just know how to do things. And also in the Muslim culture, copying is so okay, right? Pirated CDs, copying designer wear. There's always original replicas, right? I'm like, what does that even mean? Original replica. So we come from a very different culture. Sometimes it's just education. Sometimes it's just unawareness. Sometimes it's just that they don't even realize what they're doing. And if it bothers you, if you think they copied you and you want to have that conversation privately, hey, I noticed you had the same post. I feel like it's very similar to mine. Were you inspired by mine, right? In the future, I'd like for the credit to be given. I mean, obviously, if it's been shared as is. But other than that, if you have if you can, you could say, may I get rewarded for it and just let it pass.
I mean, 100%. And that's the better way to do it, 100%. I appreciate you sharing that, Sister Hafsa. There's so much gems and so much gold being shared on this episode, mashallah. We talked about the ABCD formula, right? Because I was going to ask you, what are some tips you can give to listeners on how to leverage Instagram to grow their brand? And of course, that methodology is beautiful. And you have the D is deliver sales. So let's talk about the D a little bit, since we talked about A, B, and C. What's a good way for you in your experience to approach D? Because some people, as you mentioned, they'll go in there, they'll post an image or, hey, buy my product, buy my stuff. There was no nurturing them, there was no audience, clarity there, nothing else. So what's the proper way to accomplish D in your ABCD formula?
Yeah, and what happens is when people make those posts saying buy my stuff, every single image is like 5 images back to back with the products, and then link in my profile, go buy now, right? And nobody buys, and they come back and say, I suck, I'm not worthy, my product is bad, not realizing there's a bigger picture here. And one of the things, like, worthiness is so big in the work I do, because we, especially women, we tend to take everything personally. We tend to take like direct every finger at ourselves and be like, it's my fault, right? And being able to say, maybe there's something else that's not missing here. Maybe what else do I need to try? Like being a scientist. So in terms of driving sales, one of the biggest thing is that it's that like, no, trust journey, right? Like you need to get your audience needs to get to know you, like you, and trust you. That trust does take time, especially in cultures where people aren't as trusting of like online businesses or businesses in general. Like there's this idea of like, are the other businesses trying to maybe it might scam you, and people might have been hurt in the past, right? People might have been burnt in the past, and that's why they have this sense of like this walls up. So in order to build the trust, there's so many different things that can be used to build trust. I teach what I call the 6 triggers that boost sales, the 6 mental triggers. Things like using testimonials, right? Who else has trusted you? Things like creating a community, like going back to that content piece. It's like, how can you talk to people like you belong, you understand them, you get them, to build that trust? How can you see people, help people be seen, right? And helping people, the community aspect, reciprocity. How can you give so that people are more likely to give back? How can you establish yourself as authority? Like these are all the pieces that are kind of related to content, but more related to sales, because these are the things that drive sales. And a lot of people jump straight to like, oh, just buy from me, right? But they forget that in order, like the non-Muslim world talks about dating, and they talk about how you don't go marry the first person you meet, and like, unless you are Muslim and it is an arranged marriage. So I guess we do that, but generally, like, you don't go like getting to know someone, asking, like, proposing does take time, and that's exactly what a sale process is like. You got to give it time for them to get to know you, for you to kind of see how you can help them, and before you ask for that sale.
Yeah, 100%. I love that, Michelle. So really approaching it with a value first mindset, right? Giving the value first and then asking, right? And there's this methodology by it's a very popular one by Gary V, which I'm not a huge fan of personally, but you can't hit on his methodology, which works, which is jab, 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 right hook, which essentially means like give value 3 times more than you ask, right? The right hook is the ask, the jab is giving value. And so, give value 3 times more than you actually ask your audience for something. So when you can approach it with that mindset, it becomes much more natural. So I got a few more for you here, Hafsa, if you're okay. Let's keep going, inshallah. All right, inshallah. So if someone is starting on Instagram from scratch, I think, that's one of the hardest, the hardest periods of growing on Instagram is when you're, between that 0 and 1,000 followers, and you're kind of struggling to get your first view. What's some advice that we can give them for, a great way to build their following when they're starting from scratch?
Yeah, I'm kind of known for my unpopular opinion on these things, because you don't need over 1,000 people to get sales. Like I had one of my clients, Leila. She was selling products, and products is very different than like programs and offers, because you need a lot to even make $1,000, right? With programs, it might just be 2 or 3 sales. With products, if it's like a $30 product, it takes time. But even at less than 1,000 followers, when she actually understood who to speak to, where do her followers hang out, what do her followers need, how to post to get more sales, she was constantly making sales on her Etsy shop just through Instagram. So that's number 1. Number 2, as we are looking for followers, we have to ask ourselves, am I being a leader here? Because who has followers? I mean, the word followers has become such a cliche, but think about it. Who has followers? A leader has a follower, right? So in order for other people to follow you, you got to step up and lead. You got to step up and say, you know what? I have this mission. I have this purpose. I have this product. I want to talk about this. Not talking about it is harder. One of my favorite books is by Every Book by Stephen Pressfield. And I think Do the Work is the one that is the hardest to read, because he talks about how, like, you've been given this gift. You'll be asked about this gift. This is literally what he says in the book. You'll be asked about this gift. What are you going to do with this? Maybe you have the cure to cancer. Maybe you have this something amazing. Maybe it's to paint that piece of painting that somebody needs to see. And what are you doing with that gift? If you don't use that gift, you will hurt yourself. You'll hurt the humanity, and you'll actually be asked about this, right? So really going back to being a leader, like being so driven by your purpose that whether somebody likes your post or not, you continue showing up, right? That's the part that's the hardest. Like you said, when you're not getting that encouragement, you're not getting that response. A lot of my clients come to me and they say, when I get that response, I'll show up. And I'm like, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. You got to keep showing up for the people, that even if it's 2 people. Imagine 30 people coming to your house. That's going to be a big party. But if 30 people are on your followers, you're like, oh man, I only 30 people are following me, right? So you got to switch this mindset and say, you know what? I am a leader. I have this purpose. I have this product. I have this program. I have this vision, maybe, right? Whatever it is. And being able to say, I'm going to continue talking about it. Even if nobody would. This maybe when you have a smaller follower, number one, you can build better relationships. Number two, use as a practice ground. Maybe go live every single Sunday morning, right? Every single Friday night. I don't care. Just go live and practice. Use this as a practice ground, right? Because you will have to show up as lives once you get, maybe you're waiting to get to 1,000 followers where you'll start to show up. But what are you going to do until then? Connect, build relationships. Like when you have a high ticket program, you know this. A lot of it comes from in DMs. A lot of it comes from one-on-one conversations, helping people where they need it. A lot of it comes from knowing who these people are in your followers. Like, well, I can't do that with 39,000 followers, right? But with someone with smaller followers knows what's happening in their customer's life. Hey, can we just jump on a phone call? Because I have a couple of research questions for you. It's so easy for someone with a small following to do that than me. They'd be like, who the heck are you? Or, is it a spam? Is your account spammed, right? Was your account hacked, right? So I think it's so much easier. There's so many benefits to having a smaller account that I think we just glamorize these vanity metrics. Being able to say, okay, I don't even need 1,000 customers. Maybe you need 3 customers to make that first 10K, right? Can you get those 3 customers from 30 people? Absolutely. Can you get those 3 customers from the 100 followers you have? Absolutely. So being able to say, what is my intention here? What is my goal here? How can I keep talking about that? So practical tips. I know you're like, where's the practical stuff, right?
No, trust me. This is more valuable actually for people who are really listening, because the approach is everything, right? So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, because when you Google how to grow your followers, nobody's talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Because this is who you're being, not what you're doing, right? The Google is all about what you do, but if you're not being that person, none of that works. So, so going back to some practical tips is growing your followers. There's 3 ways to grow it: organic, paid, and joint ventures. Joint ventures is collaboration. So organic is creating posts that speak to your audience, going back to that ABCD framework, saying who's my audience, what's my brand, what's the content I'm creating, how am I going to drive sales? Creating content that fits that framework. And then that's organic. Like I said, it's totally possible for you to create content that speaks to your audience and get a couple thousand followers. And I'm not saying every single post will do that. Every single post for me doesn't do that. And it is possible you can get like 15, 20, 30 followers, 100 followers, maybe 200 followers, maybe when you create posts, good posts. So organic is 1,000% possible. Organic is like the stone cutter hammering on the rock, and he does it for 100 times, and the stone doesn't break. He wants to give up, and the 101st time that he hits on it, the stone breaks into a million pieces, and he knows it's not that last one that did it. He knows that it's everything that went before it that did it, right? So that's organic content. This quote is quoted in Atomic Habits, James Clear. Look it up if you want to.
Great book, by the way. I read it myself. An amazing book.
Yeah. So organic. The next one is paid ads. Instagram ads. Facebook owns Instagram. Go pay if you can, right? If you have time, use organic. If you have money, use the paid. So obviously with paid, you got to like learn how to use paid ads, because there's a science and art to it. You just can't click boost and then be like, nothing happened, ads suck, right? That's not the way to go about it. Ads need to be targeted. Ads need to be tested. The image needs to be tested. The creative needs to be tested. Ads is completely a different science. The last one is joint ventures or collaborations. Thinking about like, where does my audience hang out? who has my people already, right? Who has a complementary business. So if you are bridal makeup artist, people who need a makeup artist, brides who need a makeup artist, also need a photographer, also need a henna artist. Hey, let's do a live together because we all have the same audience. What are some of the mistakes brides are making? I don't know. So thinking about who else has your audience, right? Instagram allows you to do a four people Instagram live now. Those are the coolest things because you're actually having such an awesome conversation with three other people, and all your followers are getting it all. The followers of all three people are getting notified that you're live with this person, right? They don't even follow you. It's such a great way of getting in front of accounts that don't follow you right now, but these are potential clients for you because you all have complementary businesses. Doing guest experts, getting on podcasts, right? Because your audience is hanging out somewhere. It goes back to that A part in the ABCD framework. Where is your audience hanging out? And just go show up there more. Sometimes it could be doing collaborations with influencers. Sometimes it could be, and I hate that word influencers. I don't know what that means, but we all know generally what that means, right?
Mhm.
So maybe it is working with someone else. Maybe it's being able, like, doing so many different things, just getting creative, right? Saying, taking responsibility. My therapist calls it agency. How can you take agency for this and say, I'm going to tie my camel?
Mhm.
I want to grow my followers. What are some of the 5 things I can do next month? Or
Mhm.
one thing I can do today? Just being creative and going through that list rather than just like doing 100 things at the same time. It's like one at a time, focus and getting to it. Like holding yourself accountable, consistent action is the way you grow your followers.
Yeah, I love that, mashallah. Sister Hafsa, what would you say to aspiring entrepreneurs who are listening to this, who are maybe afraid or shy of using social media? And this is something that I encounter with some of my students, where once we talk about social media, they understand it, they know what they need to do, but then I think there's a certain barrier of fear between them and going there and showing up and posting content, right? What would you say to that?
Yeah, showing up is such a heavy word.
Mhm.
I like, trust me, if I could, I would hide under a table. I've always been that
100%.
person.
I
Showing up
agree.
is such a heavy word, and I think I absolutely get that. I mean, as especially as women, we've been told to stay small, like like be in front of a lot of people, don't attract attention. These are all messages we've got as women. Don't speak up, right? Or even if you speak up, who's going to listen to you anyways, right? So these are all messages that have been like generationally instilled into us. This is not something you learned, you picked up, or something's wrong with you. As women, this has been something that has been, whatever reason, right? Whether to keep us safe, whatever reason it was, whether they call it religion or whatever it was, and but these are the messages we've got. And now your coaches are telling you, well, you got to show up. It is hard. You got to work through a lot of programming that you have had. Some things that kind of helped me is, and some things that help my clients is, what is your vision? What is your mission? Right? When you get clear on what your mission is, for me, it's about empowering women, helping women see their worthiness and build and grow their brands on Instagram, right? The worthiness that Allah has given them, Allah has already given them, and build and grow their brand on Instagram. So that's my mission. What is your mission? Getting clear on that and getting clear on your intention, because if you're like, oh, my uncle's wife's grandmother might watch my video and I feel embarrassed, thinking about, oh, would you think about your dream customer? My dream customer is Sumaya. Does Sumaya need to hear me, right? I'm pretty sure even Sumaya doesn't have time to watch my videos. Forget the other people that I'm worried about, right? So getting really clear on your mission and your intention. What are you here to do? One of my favorite reminders is the Barakah Culture Manifesto. For those of you listening in an audio, I'm holding up the Productive Muslims Barakah Culture Manifesto. It is actually by Productive Muslim, and he talks about, there's a line in here that I always go back to: life is not about you, it's about serving your Lord.
Hmm. Oh.
So when you put it that way, when you put it as serving your Lord with excellence, the other part of it is, so when you put it like that way, and you're thinking about, how can I best serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can I
Hmm.
live this mission that He has put me in this world for? How can I serve the people that He sent me to serve? I always talk about serving my people. Like, these are people just like me, help people like me, right? So thinking about who it is that you want to help, what is your mission? And one caveat to showing up is that showing up doesn't mean you got to point and dance in reels, or you got to be all silly and you got to do all of these things. I don't point and dance, right? So getting really clear about like what showing up means is that showing up in whatever feels right for you. One of my mentors, my peers, Sada Siddiqui, she takes a picture of a ceiling fan when she's lying down in her bed, and takes, literally, that's her picture on her Instagram, a ceiling fan, and she has an amazing caption about everything going on in her brain, right? So, and that post will get like 6,000, 7,000 likes, right? So it's not about like fitting into this formula of you got to post your outfit of the day, you got to post your good morning salam for because somebody else is doing it. What does showing up feel right for you? The way I show up is probably very different than what other people show up as. So whatever that feels right for you, and obviously we are all on a continuum, we are all on a journey. I struggled with lives for the longest time. My first video was, Assalamu alaikum, this is my first live. Okay, salam, bye. That was my first video, right? We had this in the Facebook, we had a competition on a Facebook group. That was literally my first video. And I was like, this is so weird. I'm talking to myself. But everybody's on a continuum. Your definition of showing up will change. Be willing to let it change if it's not driven by your values. Like if it's driven by your values and you're like, I won't point and dance, that's perfectly fine. But if it's fear, if it's what will people say, if it's uncomfortable, if it's all of these things, inch that, get it closer tiny bits. Maybe you do a live in a private community first. Maybe you do a live on a new Facebook account, Instagram account, but nobody follows you, right? So trying out a tiny bit of tiny small steps to getting to that comfort zone. So to summarize, what I'm talking about is, number one, define what showing up looks like for you. It looks very different than what everybody else. You're most welcome. I'm not sure who that is, but so define what showing up looks like for you, and show up and be willing to get out of your comfort zone. Get into that growth mindset rather than that fixed mindset. This is who I am. I'm not skinny enough, fair enough, white enough, whatever your definitions are. Rather than being stuck in that fixed mindset, get into a growth mindset and say, how can I do this better? How can I get closer to this? What steps can I take? How do I practice this better, right? So going back to the intentions, going back to what is your mission, going back to whatever your purpose is, and how best can you serve your audience.
Yeah, love that, mashallah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And when you approach it from that mindset, you really remove yourself and your kind of self-importance from the equation, and you make it about everything else but you. And I think that's where you remove the pressure from yourself. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. And mashallah, there's so many great tips and so much great advice that you've shared with us today, that not only our audience can benefit from, but that I can benefit from as well. So jazakallah khair for that. So I want to ask you a question, sister, that I ask every single guest on this podcast. Before we dive into some audience Q&A as well, we have some questions from the audience that are watching. And this question is the following: if you could meet Hafsa from a few years ago when she was just, she just started selling products on Etsy, $3, those little greeting cards. And she was about to embark on this journey of entrepreneurship with all the highs and lows and the challenges and the wins. And you could share with her one thing that she could hold on to throughout this journey, right? That she could hold on to as kind of like a mantra, something that she could always remember. What would that one thing be for you?
Can I do two? I am a rebel.
Please, go for it. I'll let you cheat. I'll let you cheat. Go ahead.
Don't follow rules here. One would be keep going. You're on the right path. Keep going. Just keep at it, right? Sometimes we don't see that outcome. We're like, oh, this sucks. What am I doing? Everybody has those questions, but trust me, you're on the right path. Keep going. The second would be, there's this book called Rework that Productive Muslim sent to his team back in 2009, 2010, like almost 12 years ago. I still remember the one sentence I read in there. It said, real artists ship. Like, people who want to make a difference have to put their product out there, put their offer out there. If you don't put it out there, if you don't ship that artwork you have, whatever that art is, people can't buy it, right? A lot of times we hold on to this idea we have, this idea is like, I can't share it, somebody else is going to copy it, or the idea of like, I don't know if I should do this, I should do that, should I make it 6 months, should I make it 6 weeks? All these analysis paralysis, right? So many ideas, so many options, you're sitting with them. But unless you put it out there, nobody can actually give you the feedback you want. Stop trying to read this future globe, or like this future. You're trying to figure out what the future is going to hold, which offer is going to work. Why don't you just ask the people who actually can give you the feedback, right? Real ownership, so that a lot of times, and even when my product-based business, I would create this design for my first Eid, my first Ramadan, writing together to Jannah mug set. This was some of my most bestsellers. And I'm like, oh, it's not there yet. I don't think so. It's not, I'm not sure if the bike should be turquoise or more of a blue, all these questions, right? Or should my offer be like 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 400 or 700? All of these, you will be stuck with them until you actually put it out there. There is no one answer that's going to be the right answer. There is no guide. There is no quote unquote Bible for businesses, right? Everything needs to be tested for your niche, for your audience. So the faster you put it out there, the faster you'll get the feedback. If I hadn't launched that membership 2 years ago at $27 a month, I mean, it's definitely not at $27 a month right now, I wouldn't have gotten the feedback I had gotten. I wouldn't have known that people want this. I wouldn't have had failed launches if I hadn't put things out there. Failed launches is just feedback, right? Every failure is just lessons that's telling you something didn't work. And it's your job to say what didn't work here, which part is working, which part is not working. So the faster you put things out there, the faster you'll get the feedback and the faster you'll be able to move forward. Otherwise, you'll still be stuck in this analysis paralysis loop. And there is no end to it. If you start thinking through things, there is no end to it. So stop thinking.
100%. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I completely agree, and at the end of the day, as you mentioned, it's not really a failure, but more like a learning opportunity. If you go through a challenge and maybe something doesn't work as well as you want it to, what can I learn from this? What can I improve on for next time? And now that's an opportunity where you've now tested something, you've gotten a result, and you can adjust and improve based on that result. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing, actually, because that's how business works. It's just a constant cycle of testing and improvement until you find processes, systems, offers that work. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Hafsa, and appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared so far. We have a few questions from our audience that I'd love to share with you as well, inshallah. Awesome. Just to kind of wrap this up here. So one is from Sister Alfa on Facebook, and she says, how effective is Instagram, I'll reword this, compared with TikTok to get followers and deals? So she was sharing in the comments earlier that she's seeing a lot of growth on TikTok. It's trending right now. How does that compare to Instagram? Is Instagram still as viable as TikTok? Is TikTok just the trend of the day? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Is it just a trend of the day, like MySpace and Periscope? We'll have to tell the time will tell how long they'll stick around. But I'll go back to what I said about showing up, right? Showing up looks different for different people. One, who's your audience, going back to that ABCD framework, and where does your audience live? And two, showing up looks differently for different people. Because if your audience is not on TikTok, then why would you be on TikTok talking about your business, right? Yeah. It's like looking for the Blue Mosque in Spain. Like, your Blue Mosque is not in Spain, no matter how much you look, no matter how many followers how many places you visit, you will not find the Blue Mosque. If your followers are not on TikTok, then why are you on TikTok? Like, if your audience is like older, 50 plus, maybe they're not on TikTok, and definitely they're not on TikTok. And two, showing up, right? My audience might be on TikTok, but that's not my style. That's not my showing up, my way of showing up. Like, it doesn't feel normal to me. Number three, prioritizing, right? You can't be everywhere all the time. You can't be on Facebook, you can't be on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of these at the same time. You got to, at one point or the another, you got to pick one and focus on it. Because every platform has a different language you're speaking. Twitter has a different way of tweeting. YouTube has a different format. Facebook has a different format than Instagram does. And a lot of people repurpose content. And I think you got to be really careful about that, because it might not be doing what you want it to do. Mm-hmm. It's like treating the others as the adopted kid. It's the middle child, right? I'm the middle child. And I always talk about, it feels like being the adopted kid, So like, stop treating every other platform as an adopted child and being like, okay, you know what? You just take the leftovers. No, we don't care about you anyways. Right. So picking your niche, knowing your audience, where's your audience? Does it feel like the right style for you? And where do you want to focus at the end of the day? I have some questions I want you to ask, Alpha.
Yeah, no, sorry. Go ahead. I was just gonna say, like, I feel personally targeted by this, because we treat TikTok like our adopted child. I mean, we just repost whenever we make a reel. We're like, all right, repost it on TikTok, because like we don't have time to focus on it at all. So would you? And I want to have your honest opinion. Would you advise against that and say, well, just focus on Instagram if that's what you're really focused on, or would you encourage reposting if it makes sense in terms of like the same format? What would be your opinion
So
on that?
you can repost, but don't expect it to behave like your main platform is behaving.
Right.
Don't expect the middle child to be a grateful one.
Right. Right. That's,
The middle
you know what?
child
That's fair enough.
will always complain. So
Yes.
you'll always complain about feeling like being adopted. So don't complain if they aren't growing like you want them to. You don't be like, well, I'm posting. Why is my audience not growing? Because you're not speaking, you're not engaging, you're not doing all the other things that it takes to grow TikTok. So if you are okay with just like having a presence, sure, it doesn't matter. And I know some people do that with Pinterest too. You know what? I just want to keep posting pins. You have not learned the Pinterest strategy. You've not learned all of the things how Pinterest works. And you can actually repurpose reels on Pinterest too. But obviously, it takes more than just posting content and understanding how Pinterest works. But if it just feels like you have a presence there, sure.
Okay, awesome. We have two more that we'll take from the audience, inshallah. One is, should I promote my business in a certain country or can I do it worldwide? And of course, that for whoever asked this, that depends on your business and the nature of your business. But is there anything that you'd like to share about that?
Yeah. I given COVID, I obviously, like you said, it depends on what that business is. Given COVID, I think everybody's online. I think you're missing out if you're thinking, okay, I can only promote in my local neighborhood. Given how COVID changed the structures of the world, the way the world's functioning, everything is online now. I know I actually have a client who's like, I want to do on like in-person classes, and I'm like, I understand, but people want online now, right? You got to adapt. You got to see what works best for your business. So even if you have been hesitant about, like a lot of coaches I know kind of just serve their local audiences and the local neighborhoods, and they've not ventured online, you're missing out. You're missing out on making an impact. And like Expandify, it's so possible for you to have a client from like Indonesia, Malaysia, UK, US, Australia, Dubai, right? Like you could actually be talking to all these women in the same time, right? Imagine if you could do that, right? Imagine if you could get your product out or your service out to all these countries and all, people in the widest parts of the world that need you. So
100%. 100% completely agree with that. So definitely leverage it. If it's available, why not? We got one more that I'm going to squeeze in here for you. If I have a seasonal business, this one's a good one. I eat products for kids. After Eid, I pretty much have not been posting. I don't want to just post for the sake of posting. I don't have much content right now. Is this okay? Or should I continue to post once a month to introduce myself, tell them about my business, etc.?
Great question. I think I would actually, I'll just give you some food for thought, right? Because this question is from Asma. Okay. Asma, some things for you to think about is, do you want to keep it a seasonal business? Because one of the things my clients tell me is like, one of my mastermind clients, Sidra, she does henna. She's a henna artist. She doesn't want to keep henna to being a seasonal thing. It's like Eid, Ramadan, Eid and weddings, right? She wants to make it a fun activity, maybe for night out, for sleepovers, for birthday parties, right? She wants to make henna an ongoing business for her because she wants to keep it consistent. She wants to have that consistent revenue come in, and she's thinking of ways how she can rebrand henna completely in the Muslim audience. So I want to ask you, Asma, for you to think about, do you want to keep it seasonal, right? Maybe you're like, hey, is it possible for me to have a consistent revenue all year round rather than famine and feast? It's like feast during Ramadan, feast during Eid, and then it's famine throughout the year, right? So question for you to think about. Obviously, there is no right answer. Maybe that it works best for you, the season of life you're in, and that's perfectly fine as well. So that's number one. Two, if you are a seasonal business, then obviously you have nothing to sell throughout the year. Or do you have things to sell throughout the year, right? Maybe you have smaller products, maybe you have passive income, maybe you have digital printouts, whatever it is. If it is, then you definitely want to be showing up. Well, if you absolutely have nothing to give, then you're right. It doesn't make sense to show up on Instagram or keep posting for the sake of posting, because there is no, remember the three things I asked you to think about. What is your intention? What do you want your audience to know? What do you want your audience to do when you post content? What will you want your audience to do? That's something for you to think about. Maybe you become a resource page throughout the year. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this is when you build a community. Maybe this is when you start bringing the people that need your product in Ramadan and creating a community out of them during the rest of the year. Maybe, I don't know. Things for you to think about. I hope this has given you some food for thought. This would be great for like a hot seat in one of my programs, but in Circle of Impact, we do a lot more in-depth coaching. But in the interest of time and for you, some things for you to think about, I hope that has given you some starting points there.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sister Hafsa. And as you mentioned, mashallah, you've shared so much value with us already. There's so much more that people can get out of working with you, out of, working closely and being part of Circle of Impact. So how can they go and join Circle of Impact if they're interested? And where should they go to connect with you and support you, inshallah?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Jazakallah khair. And honestly, it's an honor for me to be here and share all of this with your listeners. And I thank you for the opportunity. So for those of you that are listening, if you just go to my Instagram right now, Taher.coaching, Circle of Impact is right now closed, but we will be opening it soon. So just hop onto my Instagram, send me a message, send me a DM. I will be setting up a freebie for you guys. If you go to hafsataher.com/ummah after the live is done. And as the listeners listening to the replay, the link should be in somewhere in the show notes. And we will have a freebie for you on how to sell more on Instagram.
Nice. I love that. I love that. So it's hafsataher.com/ummah. They can go to get a freebie there.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. MashaAllah. Amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. So guys, please, if you're listening to this, whether you're watching this live or watching the recording or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, go to hafsataher.com/ummah, UMMAH, and go and download the freebie. And of course, I encourage you to consider Circle of Impact if Instagram is one of the platforms where you want to focus on. Sister Hafsa has shared so much valuable knowledge today, and I can definitely vouch for her, her ability to deliver on her promise of helping you grow on Instagram. She's done it herself, mashallah, and she's helped thousands of people do it. She can help you too if this is what you're looking for. Hafsa, thank you so much for joining us, and jazakallah khair for being on this podcast and taking your valuable time today to share with us all this knowledge and expertise that you've done with us today. I really hope that we can bring you on in the future as well, maybe for some different discussions regarding Instagram, social media, and everything else.
Thank you so much for having me, and everyone listening. Thank you so much for actually getting to the end of the show so far. I know there's been a lot of tangible words through the conversations. I hope you found this beneficial. I'd love to get in touch with you. Send me a DM on Instagram, hafsataher.coaching, and let me know, share your gems. I'd love to hear from you and see how best I can help you. And thank you so much for having me once again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair, Hafsa. And guys, you know the drill. If you did enjoy this episode, if you enjoy this podcast and you listen to it, just go ahead and leave us a rating and review, whether you listen on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to. Just go and leave us a rating to support us, inshallah, and help us grow this podcast. And of course, if you are looking for mentorship specifically with your online business, you can go and book a call with us. It's ummahpreneur.com/call, where we'll speak to you to understand what your goals are and how we can help you, inshallah. Until then, we'll see you next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.